Tell us how you and Pedro Gomez got together on the story. This is more than 20 years ago.
In 1999, the United States and Cuba agreed to allow a Major League Baseball team, the Baltimore Orioles, to play a Cuban all-star team in Cuba. And Pedro got credentialed for that game. And it was historic because it was a bit of kind of baseball diplomacy aimed at thawing this Cold War chill between our two nations. And Pedro was really excited about the prospect of getting to be part of history.
And not only was he part of baseball history, this was family history. What did the two of you talk about before he actually went on the trip about his family history?
Well, Pedro, like most journalists, was a little reluctant to become a part of the story, but it was clear that his story in many ways was the story, because he was the son of Cuban immigrants who fled Cuba with pretty much nothing but the clothes on their backs. I mean, they left family heirlooms, all their jewelry, all their family photographs. They had to leave them behind in Cuba. And they fled to the US in 1962, and Pedro was born in Miami 3 weeks after they fled. And the big reason why they fled was that they didn't want to raise their son in Castro's communist Cuba. They wanted him to be free. So it was a deeply personal thing for Pedro. And, you know, he felt really comfortable covering the balls and the strikes, and he felt comfortable talking about the political and historical significance, but he was a little less comfortable letting his personal story become the story.
Did he have a moment when he realized how significant that was? Maybe because I think he went back to see his family's home, didn't he?
Yeah, you know, one column that he filed from there, and I mean, it was just such an incredible experience. You know, here I am, the son of or the grandson of Italian immigrants, talking to the son of Cuban immigrants, who's calling from the communist country that his parents fled, working on a newspaper story together. It was just like the most American thing you could possibly imagine. But he wrote, you know, about watching the sun come up in Havana and thinking about, you know, his own family back here in Phoenix. And, you know, so it was just, it was very emotional. Before he went to Cuba, his father drew him a map of their family home where he could find it. And Pedro actually was able to find the family home. And, all his life, he had sort of grown up with stories about the old man who lived upstairs. And when Pedro got to his family home, that old man still lived there. And he was a fervent communist, and but he was just kind of shocked to be able to meet Pedro. And he had urged the family not to leave, and said, you know, his future is here. He can become a good communist. He can become anything he wants, a scientist or anything like that. And so, you know, the guy was very touched, but, you know, he still felt that, you know, Pedro might have just gotten lucky here in the United States. So, but it was a very touching story.
Did Pedro share the memory that stuck with him the most?
You know, I think that was definitely one of him with the old man. You know, there were also vignettes from the game. Will Clark, who was the Orioles' first baseman, I believe at the time, got upset because a Cuban player spiked the baseball in front of him at the end of an inning. And Will Clark had no idea that was, you know, Cuban tradition, that you leave the ball near the closest opposing player. So, you know, Pedro kind of laughed about some of those, you know, those cultural things that get lost in translation. But yeah, years later, I know he went back to Cuba. He actually made several trips back there, and on one of the most recent ones, His father and his brother had both since passed away. And he brought some portions of their ashes, and he spread them when he was there in Cuba. And I know that, that really meant a lot to him, to sort of bring things full circle that way.
Well, that's giving me a chill as you say that.
Yeah.
What a moment.
Yeah. Pedro was also a journalist of incredible courage, and he was in journalism. We talk a lot about telling the truth, and Pedro was a truth teller. On the eve of Game 7 of the Diamondbacks World Series, and this is the biggest game in Curt Schilling's life that he's getting ready to pitch. Pedro essentially called him out for not being a team player, for being only concerned with Curt, for trying to set up, a narrative that where if Curt went out there and lost the game, that Curt could still be the hero. And Schilling really never forgave Pedro for that. And a couple years ago, Pedro was speaking to a group of interns at the Republic. And I asked him about, that and why he felt it was important to do it at the time. And he said something that, that really just resonated, not with the young journalist, but with me as well. And it's that, when you're a journalist, there's always somebody out there who knows what the truth is. And if you as a journalist aren't telling the truth, then they know it and you know it. And so, if you want to be able to be respected and to respect yourself, you have to tell that truth, and you have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror every day. And, I know that Pedro, when he looked in the mirror, he not only saw a really good looking guy, but he saw, somebody that Pedro could live with. And that was a real man of integrity.